Hey, Redditors, have you ever removed someone from your life for the purpose of improving yourself as a person? I had to cut ties with my grandmother for 2 reasons. First, she seems to constantly pit her own kids against each other. Well, so and so said this and thinks you did this, and then watches the drama blow up between them. She has 9 of them to choose from to create shitstorms. She started dragging grandkids into the mess, and I got out of it. I've not talked to her in a year, and it's been fairly quiet in terms of drama related to my family. Second, being my paternal grandmother, she was trying to turn my siblings and me against my mother after my parents divorced. She would deny my mother access to us on her visitation weekends, but tell us that my mother was coming to visit us. This would leave us disappointed and hurt, which she would come in and console us. Eventually, my mother quit trying to visit and I didn't hear from her for 2 years. We then found cards and letters from my mom for birthdays, holidays and random days for 10 years. TLDR. Grandmother is evil. Best friend from secondary school. After we both fricked up our A levels, I spent about a year around his house every day smoking weed, drinking, watching films and making really bad music. Then I looked at all our other friends who were doing degrees, starting careers, traveling, or even just going out and having proper fun and getting laid. I stopped hanging out with him, got a job and went to night school. 10 years later he's still living with his parents and has exactly the same lifestyle at 28. I see him now and again, but we don't hang. It's sad. 15 years ago he was a bright, creative kid. Like most people, I grew up with a group of people whom I felt I shared many aspects of my life with. Unfortunately, they got heavy into drugs while I wanted nothing to do with it. I cut my ties with them and have gone on to finish college while most of them are on their 3rd kid and 4th parole hearing. I derived a few lessons from this. We often mistake proximity and commonalities for friendship instead of acquaintances. I have great friends now, ones who are friends based on not just similar personalities, but the time spent together improving both our lives. Travel, in particular, real friends, like real significant others, are based on a give and take scenario. You should mutually improve each other, otherwise it's a largely parasitic relationship. Friends come and friends go. Some friends you may have for the rest of your life, but most you won't. I like to imagine my relationships like 2 trains running on parallel tracks. We're traveling to the same destination for now, but eventually our lives will fork and we'll continue down our respective paths. There's nothing wrong with that. Forcing one person to derail their life for you, and vice versa, causes wrecks. People change, no matter how much we want to try and ignore it. It's a fact of life. We are dynamic creatures who are the whole of our sums. Each experience we have develops character, which in turn changes us. College relationships are an excellent example of this. Whether it's 2 summer love kids or 2 best friends, come break time you'll find yourself not only questioning who they have become, but who you have become as well. It happens, but we're often not cognizant of it and fights erupt. Well said. I like your parallel train analogy. The best quote I've heard about this is sometimes you have to burn your bridges so that crazies don't follow. I've gotten rid of a lot of friends over the past year, and I've seen a sharp increase in my overall well-being. I was the problem solver go-to guy for a lot of people. Drug users, emotionally unstable people, and just overall lazy people. And the cliche misery loves company rings true. You have to cut people out. It sucks, but it's necessary because most of the time these people pull you down. You don't pull them up. I noticed my friends sapping my time and energy that I could have used for myself. It's selfish, but it's also your life. Worked awesome for me. Got rid of crappy friends, bad habits of my own and did good for others, then ended up engaged, getting married in 3 weeks and finally moving away from the town I've lived in since birth. I've done the same with people I used to party with. Many people go through a time in life when they experiment and shirk responsibility. Hopefully that time passes at some point. I've let go of friendships where the only thing I really had in common with people was the desire to drink and use drugs. These people were not all what I'd call negative. Some were. Some had positive attitudes, but they weren't going to encourage me to better myself. Some people have been let go because of excess drama. It kind of hurts a time. I miss people. but I've always been able to make friends. While reading your comment, which I really appreciate, by the way, I pictured you as a really mellow, bearded dude. Then I read your account name, and then I pictured you as a really mellow, bearded dude in a half tee and boy shorts. I think something's wrong with me. I don't think a lot of people in this thread are really getting at what you wanted. They are talking about distancing themselves from people, rather than outright cutting someone out. I did the latter, about 2 years ago. Was this selfish? Probably. Did it hurt her? Yup, I would imagine so. It hurt for me, too. Basically, I was in the friend zone, completely in love with this girl. I'm pretty sure there was a few months where I had a chance when she broke up with her boyfriend, but we happened to get into a stupid fight over something, and I missed it. By the time we were on good speaking terms again, she was getting back together with said boyfriend. This whole thing was a disaster for my self-esteem and my romantic life. I could never date anyone, really, because I was head over heels for this girl. I was wound up with thoughts of what can I do? How do I get her? All in all, a toxic situation for me. So, one day, during an otherwise pleasant conversation, one of those mildly flirty, joking around ones that any guy who has been in the friend zone will know all too well, I just said I'm done. Explained to her that I couldn't do this anymore, that I wanted something she was never going to give me, and that I didn't think that I could handle being friends with her because of my feelings for her, and that was that. I never spoke to her again, except once I bumped into her, exchanged small talk. I still cared about her, probably still do, but I think it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. Thank you for this. I am in the exact same situation. I know what I need to do, but there's a completely irrational part of me that insists that if I just keep trying, she will eventually change her mind about me. She's never going to change her mind. I just need to move on. Knowing that there's other guys who have gone through the same thing will make it easier to do what I have to do. Absolutely. I finally realized years ago that people who stress me out and cause me problems are wasting the precious time I have on earth. When if I decide someone is bringing me or my family down, I excise them from my life. Completely. It's as if they don't exist. It works too. I just don't have to think about them anymore and can move on to more productive things. I used to live in a small gang-ridden town. There was only one store and a McDonald's, so work was rare. What else is there to do? It was either leave or join a gang. I left an entire city to better myself. I go back for funerals, that's about it. That must have been really hard. Congrats on getting out. For numerous reasons, I severed all contact with both of my parents 5 years ago, save for the occasional bizarre text message from my mother. Would you like to go out to dinner in the new Woody Allen movie? It hasn't been difficult to maintain my distance. I very much wish I had a conventional family life, but know for certain that such a thing would be impossible with these two people. The last 3 women I've slept with and actually cared for have been removed one way or another. It's often interesting to reminisce, but I'm really just glad they're gone. Toxic people are toxic. Yes, I had to purposefully bow out of many of my friendships because they were not substantial or constructive. There is a caveat, however. Let's say you wish to become a more honest and truthful person. You stop associating with that one or couple of friends that always seem to embellish or outright lie a lot. You've now made the commitment to be a more forward and sincere person. You begin to realize that aside from your friends' outlandish tales, they are still pretty good people. You guys have a lot of history. Eventually, after hanging around them again, you'll notice your values have changed and you are no longer the same person you were. You no longer take interest in some of the same things. This isn't even counting the other side of the process. For example, your friend starts to get defensive, thinking you are a stick in the mud because you won't join in on some of the things you used to do or joke about. They may start to believe that you think you are better than they are. People don't like being forcefully shown a better version of themselves. They make excuses. They get defensive. They get angry. Imagine an alcoholic. After vowing never to drink again, the recovering alcoholic will think, man, there isn't anything really wrong with hanging out with the guys, save for their excessive drinking. I am sure we have a lot of other things in common. He will soon find out he either has nothing in common with these guys or they will constantly persuade him to lapse back into old habits. A real and true friend will help him in his quest for sobriety and congratulate him for making the right choice. Note that these people are very few and far between. TLDR. People are immature and will hate you for trying to better yourself. Also, don't assume you are a better person just because you've kicked a bad habit. Yes, I have several times. People who are negative and do nothing that adds to my life, or those who I hear from only when they need something. The former was a friend who was always pissed a lot in life and never did anything about it but complain and blame it on others. The latter were people who saw me as free computer support. Now, if I hear from someone and my first reaction is to cringe, then it's time for them to go. Those who I hear from only when they need something, that can take a while to recognize if the person is otherwise okay. I was best friends with this girl that used to live like a block away from me. I am also a female. We were pretty close throughout middle school and part of high school. One thing that did bother me though, she was very outspoken and had very high self-esteem. At least that's how she presented herself to others. This made me feel inferior in a way, me being a shy person. And there would be times when I felt like she also saw me as a social inferior. For the odd part though, we were like sisters and hung out literally every day. After a while though, she started hanging with other people, began to act more like them, and it seemed that when we would hang out she'd want to use me for a free ride somewhere. I ended up going out with my now current boyfriend in high school, so he slowly began taking this girl's place. Our friendship pretty much faded, and I saw her in school still, but we didn't really talk. I had assumed that both of us had figured to move on, go our ways and whatnot. Even though I hadn't really made a choice in ending the friendship, I'm glad it happened. I gained a lot of confidence in myself and gained a lot of self-esteem. I remember, towards the end of high school or maybe even shortly after graduating, she sent me a message online claiming that I had been avoiding her and that I was at fault for our parting ways. Didn't want to start anything, so I sent her back a message saying, yes, maybe I was partly at fault, but so was she. Life occurs this way. People come in and out all the time, and she probably has friends now that would appreciate her more than I would. Didn't hear back from her again. That was a remarkably reasonable way to deal with her. Absolutely, I am constantly amazed at the people who allow negative influences to suck the life out of them. That is, my ex left me heartbroken and penniless, cheated on me, hasn't talked to me in 5 years but now wants to talk to me. What should I do? That's the first part. The second part is far more important, far more complicated, and far harder to apply in real life. The second part is that if you really care about other people, you have to consider what is in their best interest, which quite often means cutting them off from financial, physical, and emotional support. So many people engage in self-destructive behavior, but are enabled by people who feel guilty and support them. And, in my experience, the emotional support, that is, someone to talk to who will listen, is often the worst of all. Cutting someone off should not be taken lightly, but at times it is in the best interests of both parties. A year or so ago I stopped having lunch with a group of co-workers because of their homophobia. Aside from that they were alright, but it wasn't even so much the homophobia, it was that I couldn't call them out on it because I'm not out and can't be out, even to them, or I would lose my job. So I had to just take it in silence. That was not an environment I needed to be in. So I just gave up on them, and even if it means I'm eating lunch alone more often, I'm happier and saner. I have released quite a few people over the years. I now try to be with people who I can really communicate with, and or people who actually value life. Big drinkers and druggies were the first to go though, although I still occasionally love to get crap-faced, just not too often. I had a big drug problem and I got a girl pregnant. She wanted to keep the kid and I told her I'd help raise it. However, we were just frick buddies with no feelings for each other. Made the transition even harder because I quit all drugs and lost connection with most of my friends because I would fall back into it. My baby is 2 next month. Have maybe a dozen real friends. No girlfriend. I'm broke as heck. I live on a oatmeal and ramen diet. and I'm very lonely, but I'm there for my daughter who I loved with all my life and won't change my decisions for anything. My baby gives me the courage and determination to do anything. But if I didn't change my life, I'm certain I'd be dead by now. Upvote for being a good father. Good to hear. The idea to cherry pick people in and out of your own life under the guise of removing toxic influences seems to have gotten really huge lately, over the course of perhaps the past 10 years. As someone who's known his fair share of pathological narcissists, histrionics, and drug addicts, I definitely agree there's a time and a place for it. But what I'm personally seeing much more often is people coming to rationalize only choosing company that agrees with them and makes them feel good about themselves due to this conduct having gained mainstream legitimacy, which, in all cases I have observed, appears only to further delude people and do more harm than good. I've taken breaks from toxic people, but I usually try to tolerate them, especially when I see that nobody else is doing it or their associates are just enabling them. What I've had happen far more often is toxic people will employ some self-justifying logic to dissociate themselves from me, specifically because they don't want company that holds them accountable, even in minimal, helpfully suggestive ways. Yes, I've decided to not hang out with a dude I've known forever simply because he turned into a narcissistic, underage girl freaking, obnoxious, weed stealing bruh guy. I still see him from time to time, but I don't try to hang out with him. Bruh guy. Haha. This made me chuckle. Numerous people, including my dad. If someone is complete negative influence on your life and unchangeable by any reasonable action, the only thing to do is cut them loose. In my case it was a brutal process and left lasting emotional scars, but I'm much better off as a person than I would have been. I've removed a few people from my life for being toxic, but only one that I was really close with. It was a good friend of mine that I'd known since birth. She's fricked up in ways that definitely aren't her fault, molested as a child, but as an adult, she developed quite the drug, and alcohol problem. It was devastating to see a good friend go down this path, but she constantly caused drama for herself and then would spend hours complaining about it. She always wanted to talk about herself and rarely wanted to listen. She always needed money. I always wanted to help her, but after a while I realized I was only enabling her in a variety of ways. About a year ago she was arrested for drunk driving and had apparently assaulted 6 police officers when they tried to take her into custody. She asked me to bail her out before she even called her parents, who are perfectly nice people, and not the ones who molested her. So after more than 20 years of being friends, I decided that the relationship was a huge emotional financial time drain for me and cut her off. I didn't explain why. I just stopped answering calls and didn't give her my new address when I moved. It's easier this way. I've been on the receiving end of this before and it's not a nice thing, especially if it happens with no warning explanation. I'd advise trying to work things out with people before you drop them. I have a list of people. Some of them due to circumstances, others due to my spidey sense going off. Nearly all of the high school friends I used to be with. This is going to sound harsh, but most of them didn't put enough effort in their lives. They wanted to coast and let the gov take care of them through the welfare program. I didn't want that. Maybe the combination of ambition and independence was enough to realize that if I continue my friendship with them, I will be dragged into situations that would be unwise, uncomfortable, or unwanted not by choice. I did have a continuing contact with 2 friends from high school for years afterwards, but that lasted until I got my BS degree. After that, they just drifted off to their own lives. Also, instead of cutting ties entirely from my life, I severely reduced my involvement with my family instead, except for one of my brothers. This is all due to religion. They are the types in where they believe the literal translation of the Bible. They are not fond of people who are not part of the norm, and my opinions clash with theirs. It sometimes frustrates me because I can't have intelligent conversations with them if I do down a road that I know is controversial. For example, gay marriage. Their only talking points are quotes from the Bible. Then we get into a discussion about the Bible and I point out loopholes. For example, slavery, selling daughters, shellfish, etc. And they would completely ignore them or scoff at them. It frustrates me because I try to bond with them for the last 15 years and I got nothing out of it except anger and depression for a good period of my life. It is true that if you keep people who are positive influences in your life, you start developing their traits. This is true vice versa. You hope that people who are positive influences in your life will take you down a path that meets your life goals. All know is removing someone from your life is a hard decision, but it sometimes becomes necessary for you to live. Selfish? Yes. Necessary? Yes. Plenty. From people who take advantage of you to people who have abused your trust. It doesn't have to be some dramatic process. You just quit hanging out with them and move on. This way you end up discovering your values, morals, and ultimately what you stand for. In the future you used what you learned to choose the company you keep. Yes, this dude was a friend of mine. We were like best friends. So anyway, he was selling pills apparently. I know. I was surprised too. So he sells to some cops. Then he comes to me. Tells me I don't have a record, and if I take the rap for him, heck, pay my fines, lawyers, etc. He had a previous record for selling pills. He told me all kind of things trying to scare me into taking his blame. I knew from the get-go he was trying to manipulate me, so I walked away. I left stuff over his place. He owed me money, etc. I just walked away, cut him out of my life like a cancer. I tried this once, but it wound up improving the person I removed. So I removed them from everyone's life. Now I'm inmate of the month. It works. I've done this, and I can attest it can be an incredibly difficult thing to do. Particularly in the case of, you may have guessed, World of Warcraft. Like so many millions of people, I was pouring hours and hours and hours into WoW to the detriment of my studies, many aspects of my social life, and my overall health. I happened to be blessed enough to play with a group of people I met in real life, and we became fast friends even away from the computer. The problem became my relationship with them when I realized WoW was a toxic element in my life. I left, but maintained my friendships away from the game. They were all good-natured, caring people that understood real life comes first, so on and so forth. So they supported my decision to leave, but never to the point where they understood that it was inappropriate to jokingly ask me to come back to the game. I understand their perspective. I really do. We were still friends. They missed having me around as often. And to them, what they were doing wasn't like teasing a junkie with a needle. Because to them WoW wasn't a needle. They could manage their lives in their WoW time. They could indulge without going to excess. I could not. And I wanted to go back. The allure was made much more powerful by the presence of people I cared a great deal for. But attempts to dabble led to disaster, so I had to cut the game, and the people tempting me back to it, from my life. It was difficult, because it all felt unfair. They had done nothing wrong, but battling my addiction meant I had to inflict suffering on innocent people if I ever wanted a shot at being a decent friend or human being to anyone else. I felt weak, and embarrassed, and childish every time I made excuses to avoid hanging out with them, always cowering away from telling them that the very game that had forged our friendship was destroying my life. To some degree, that is also a mirror I did not want to shine on them. Eventually I think, they got the message. The calls stopped coming. The great WoW machine kept on churning, and I moved on with my life. We still exchange cursory happy birthdays on Facebook, and I can even play WoW now without feeling the need to dedicate 8 hours a day to it, but the damage is done. We aren't really friends anymore, and that sucks. A lot. Hey, sometimes you meet a real crap but don't realize it for some reason. Eventually you'll realize that this person is bad for you, has little to no respect for you, and seems to drag you into their own frick-ups. I dropped a person whose acquaintance had worn very thin. Yes, I had a friend for probably 10 years. We were roommates for the last 3. I recently bought a condo and he recently bought a house, and last week, I removed him from all electronic forms of communication. Facebook, AIM, etc. I did this basically because he has dependency issues and latches onto father figures, butthole dominant type A, because he hated his own for treating him horribly. Additionally, the father figures that he typically gravitates to are people who are horrible and usually racist. He's kind of always been a bigot, but I couldn't take any more after a while. For the last year that we lived together, I basically just stopped talking to him for more than 5 minutes at a time, and we would rarely, if ever, go anywhere or do anything together. Before I forget, he is also a trust violator. Anything you think you say in confidence to him, he will arbitrarily bring up to the worst possible person at the worst possible time in order to gain attention. It just so happens that one of my other friends who does still hang out with him brought us up after it happened to him, and that it nearly destroyed his relationship with other friends and his wife. After we both got new homes, I invited him to my housewarming 2 weeks ago, which thankfully he declined. I don't plan on being around anyone that wants to associate with him in the future. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.